All right, your third and final lecture for the week, Cold War, and this time we take a look at the Cold War in the United States actions in Asia. Fascinating topic, Korean War here. Some good stories as always, and it's an interesting history. I love this stuff. All right, so with that, let's get to it. Here we go. Last one of the week, Cold War 3. We're just going to check in here. All right, here's your quiz. Feel free to pause it as always to see if you get the correct answers. I'll put them all up here right now, okay, and give you the answers after I'm done. 1, what was the name of the economic relief plan for post-war Europe? This one you might say there's 2 possible answers. You could say all the way back to the Truman Doctrine or containment, but really I'm looking for the answer of the Marshall Plan. That gives all of Europe the relief plan. All right, so the Marshall Plan. 2, what was the main issue that resulted in the lockdown of Berlin by Stalin? The issue that caused all of this was the disagreement over currency. The people of Berlin wanted the American currency, and it was an insult to Stalin. People didn't want the Russian ruble. 3, what did Stalin do that forced the Allies to carry out the Berlin airlift? He basically locked down the city. Nothing could get in via the roads or freight. 4, what was the construction of the Berlin Wall a major disadvantage for citizens of West Berlin? And the answer is something defective. They were trapped. They couldn't get out. The wall was built completely around them, and it surrounded them for almost 30 years. 5, what's the name of the U.S. military alliance that formed in 1949? Still exists today? That would be NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. 6, describe 3 design aspects of the Berlin Wall that made it nearly impossible for citizens to get across. You could say double-walled, or you could say rounded walls at the top. You could say minefields, you could say guard towers, you could say machine gun turrets, any one of those, barbed wire. There's a lot of things that lock people down for almost 30 years. 7, true or false? The U.S., French, and British occupied West Germany and unified it into one nation post-World War II. That's true. They did. They unified it into West Germany. 8, true or false? The Soviet Union Warsaw Pact was formed before the American military alliance. That would be false. They formed the Warsaw Pact after NATO's established. NATO's 1949. Warsaw Pact's 1955, and it's in response to NATO. Extra credit, this kind of 2 unique manners that was so much some Berliners escaped through the Berlin Wall. Guys stole tanks, some people swam across different channels, hot air balloons, sort of jumped over the wall from different buildings, so pretty wild stuff. All right, Cold War 3, Cold War in Asia. Learning targets today, I want you to understand the armed struggle with communism, including the Korean War. So we'll look at how America is involved in the Korean War. Oftentimes this war is not covered as well by some historians, oftentimes called the Forgotten War in American history. So let's rewind this thing a little bit. So what's been going on right now, you know, Russia, the Soviet Union has been communist. It's taken vast areas of Europe as well. And now we took a moment where China becomes a communist country. It still is to this day. Okay, so let's start to break this thing down so you understand what's going on. I'll put all of it up there and walk you through it. So China from 1929 to 1949. So here is the leader, Chiang Kai-shek. All right, I will not make you spell that. Chiang Kai-shek. He's the leader of China from 1928 to about 1949, and he's the leader of the Chinese Nationalist Party. And they, like the United States, there's no issues with us. Okay, we actually have an agreement. We're okay with this, the national leaders of the Nationalist Party of China. But they're fighting this internal rebellion, this civil war growing inside of China. It's the growth of communism. One reason why communism does well in poor countries, remember, it's the idea that if you're poor, so many people are poor, if you take the money and the wealth from the rich and you redistribute that, it's going to make your terrible existence as a peasant perhaps a little better. So there's an appeal for communism in poor countries. And China is poor at this portion of history. So when someone's coming along saying, hey, we're going to take the money from the rich and give it back to you and make your life better, people are joining communism. So there's a war inside China. It's this ideological war between the Nationalist Party of Chiang Kai-shek and the growth of communism. All right? But all of that is kind of just temporarily stopped. When Japan invades in 1937 into the 1940s, and as you remember, they are in like Manchuria. They're doing terrible things in China, raping women and so on, wars against war crimes. The two sides stopped fighting. They actually unified temporarily to stop the growth, the invasion by the Japanese. So these two different ideological sides of China temporarily put aside their differences and they work against the Japanese. And once Japan loses and they're removed from China by 1945, that's when the war starts again. All right, so they work together to get rid of the Japanese, and as soon as that threat is done, they're like, okay, it's civil war against each other in China. And the communists are in charge. They will eventually drive the nationalist groups from China and take over. They establish the People's Republic of China, which it is even to this day. Chiang Kai-shek himself flees to Taiwan, and his government's been in limbo and exile there since 1949. So here's the guy that takes over. This is George Washington is to the United States as Mao Zedong is to Communist China. He's the leader of the Communist Party in China. Right? And like I said earlier, communism is appealing to the poor because it offers them more wealth than they had before. So that's why so many people join communism. Right? So, and this is a critical moment in history. You have to understand it. This is the moment China becomes communist, 1949. So the Soviet Union is a communist country. They've taken large sections of Europe, which are communist countries, and now China has fallen to communism. Communism is growing in the middle portion of the 20th century, and it scares the United States. Right? So we do not accept this government as the legit government of China until the 1970s with Richard Nixon. We continue to believe that it's just nothing more than a coup, that the proper Chinese government, which is in Taiwan, is the proper government, and we don't admit it till almost 20 years later. Finally, America admits in the 1970s that China is controlled by the Communist Party. All right, so that's the first wave, the fall of China to communism in 1949. All right, definitely understand Mao, and that's an important, critical understanding here. All right, so let's take a look at this next. So 1950 to 1953 is another chance where Korea almost becomes a communist country as well. Korea, North Korea today is considered, well, it's not considered communist, it's authoritarian, but we'll look at how that came to be. All right, so let's start to break this thing down for you. So Korea is divided at the 30th parallel after World War II. All right? Japan had taken over the country and overrun it in World War II, and as Japan is removed, they temporarily divide the country in half at the 38th parallel. 30th parallel is a big one to understand. All right, get it in your head. So it literally divides the country in half. So that's what you understand. There's one group in North Korea, a government, and there's one also in South Korea. Right? So one's communist and one's democratic. And this is where you start to see the rise of this crazy family, Kim Jong-un. All right, this is the current leader. This is Kim Jong-il, and this is Kim Il-sung. The Koreans believe, North Koreans believe, this guy was a god who stepped off the mountains and became the leader of Korea. They literally think he was a god. And this is his son, and this is his son, and it's a family dynasty right now in North Korea. So let's break this thing down. On your assessment, you're going to see the different stages of the Korean War. Let's take a look at stage one of how this thing happens. All right. So stage one, North Korea attacks. 1950, North Korea sweeps across the 30th parallel, which is right here, in a surprise attack against South Korea. All right. And they're pushing the forces all the way down. The only thing left of North Korea, their capital, Seoul, falls. The only thing left is this area where the city of Busan is, and that's it. This is stage one. North Korea, in an unexpected attack with mostly supplies from the Soviet Union and China, communist countries, launched an attack, and they're wildly successful. South Korea is about to fall. All right, they're holding the line, but they need help, and this is when they start to call the United Nations, and they're asking for help. Like, we need help. We're about to be overrun by a communist country, and we didn't ask for this war. So that's stage one. All right. Stage two, the United Nations agrees. They're like, okay, we are going to help you out. So the Americans take the lead. We're the only country that's strong enough after World War II to engage itself in another war. So we appoint General MacArthur, Douglas MacArthur, interesting guy in history. He's in charge of the American forces who are going to help save South Korea. Why South Korea? Because it's a democratic country. We don't want another country to fall to communism. So MacArthur is this hero from World War II in the Pacific. He's this large-in-life personality, one aviators, his corncob pipe. He's one of the only 5-star generals in U.S. military history. So he's in charge of this. All right. So let's look at stage 2. So stage 2 really is we get involved. We launch a surprise attack right in the middle of Korea. All right. So I want you to pay attention to this here. We launch an amphibious landing into the city of Incheon. Incheon is controlled by South Korea at this point in history, but we snap their supply lines. Imagine, if you would, I had a hairband. I could pull this hairband like this, and there's this tension. It's getting tight. That's the supply lines of North Korea. The further you get away from your area of supplies, the more risky it is. When America goes in right to the middle, imagine me cutting it with a scissor. We snap the supply lines. We show up, and we do Americans do best at this time frame. We just whoop them militarily. And then you start to see, we start to push all the way up here to the top. So stage 2 is when America gets involved. We have this surprise amphibious landing here in Incheon, and we snap the North Korean supply lines. All right, and we've pushed them all the way back to North Koreans, all the way up to the Yulao River. You're almost near China. All right, so stage 2, it's going well. America gets in, we just whoop them. We whoop the North Koreans. And this is when MacArthur makes a big mistake. That big ego of his gets in trouble. He gets on the Army radio waves. He's talking to the U.S. soldiers in North Korea, and he says something to the effect of, boys, we'll have you home by Christmas, meaning the war is over. We've won. A mistake. It's a mistake. All right. So stage 2, America's up here. But if you look carefully, here's a democratic South Korea in the United States. All the way up here is hardly anything left of North Korea, but right next to China. China doesn't like the idea of a unified North Korea, a democratic, American influence country being so close to its border. So it's going to take some action. So about 300,000 Chinese troops are going to be moved in, and they moved them carefully. They gave them white military clothes because there's snow at this time frame, and they moved them at night. So as Americans are patrolling via the air and looking what China's doing, they miss it. About 300,000 Chinese soldiers are moving closer to the border and into North Korea to support the North Koreans. So this is stage 2. America's won. They've won for this moment. They've snapped the supply lines. We're all the way up at the top here, but China's getting ready to act, and that'll be stage 3. Okay, so all right, and then I kind of jumped ahead a little bit here, but here's stage 3 now coming up. All right, I'm gonna get to this. All right, so stage 3, we are attacked. We are outnumbered. This is stage 3 here. Americans are pushed all the way back down, and there's just constant battles. They're kind of holding the line here between North and South Korea. The Chinese are helping here, the Americans are helping South Korea, and there's a stalemate. They're sitting roughly at the 30th parallel. So it's almost exactly where all this began at, and we're sitting right here. Now here's the next step. What do we do? Americans on the retreat, and we're not used to being in retreat. What will America do next? All right, so stage 1, all the way down. Stage 2, Americans surprise amphibious landing Incheon all the way up. And stage 3, the Americans are pushed back down here, and we don't like losing. So what will we do? All right. So MacArthur recommends attacking China. Now, why China? They attacked us. There's some logic behind this. They're the country intervening, basically saving North Korea's tail. So MacArthur recommends attacking China. Risky? Yes, because what he does, he suggests using a nuclear weapon on China. In fact, using nuclear weapons and dropping it on the largest cities in the area of China, Manchuria, that's located near Korea. He wants to drop nuclear weapons on Chinese cities as a warning. Would it work? Oh, I'm pretty sure. And this is a guess, it's speculative. I'm pretty sure it would probably stop the war. But at the same time, we're nuking China. This would probably be the dawn of World War III. Now consider, China is a communist country. The Soviet Union is a communist country. The Soviet Union is looking for any kind of thing to start a possible World War III and take Europe. So this would be the dawn of World War III if we did it. Would it work temporarily in the moment? Absolutely. Would it cause the start of World War III? Not even 4 years removed from the end of World War II? Yes. So Truman opts not to use nuclear weapons on China. He doesn't want to do it. And it ticked MacArthur off. Now remember, who's in charge here? Is the president in charge, or is the general in charge? And ultimately, it's the president. The president's commander-in-chief. He's in charge of military forces. He tells them no. MacArthur doesn't like hearing no. All right. So a battle erupts between Truman, the president, and MacArthur over what they're going to do. So let's get to this one. MacArthur is told no by Truman, and he's going to get back at him. He's like, okay, I can't use nuclear weapons, but I can get the president. I can hurt the president politically. So what he starts to do is he goes to newspapers, he goes to magazines, he goes to Republican leaders, because Truman's a Democrat, and he just starts bashing the president, calls him a weak leader, not wanting to end the war. So this is his way to get back at him. It's a political move against the president. And it's a way to hurt the president, because he was told, no, we can't use nuclear weapons. All right. Truman doesn't like it at all. When your general goes against your word and kind of just starts to get at you politically, Truman views it as insubordination. Insubordination is you refuse to follow the orders of your commanding officer. So it's insubordination, and Truman fires MacArthur. All right. So MacArthur here, it's a weird thing. If I got fired, there wouldn't be a parade. I'm sure of that. MacArthur's so loved by the American public for what he did in World War II and his larger-than-life persona that he's actually given a ticker tape parade in New York City here for his firing. Weird. It's some weird stuff, but he's loved by the American public. Truth be told, Truman probably did the right thing. He probably prevented World War III as we know it. But in the moment, MacArthur looks like he's won, even though he's been fired. But no nuclear weapons are used, and we avoid World War III in the Korean War. And that's the way it continues. So stage 3, everything goes back. All right, there's a line right here. They're fighting slightly below the 30th parallel. And stage 3 really is just the stalemate. No side is going to win. The Soviets actually suggest a ceasefire, that both sides stop fighting, they put down their weapons, and it's like playing a video game. They both just put this war on pause since 1951. They've built up their supplies. They have the most armed area in the world. It happens between North and South Korea. All right, so they established a ceasefire line that exists today. There's this thing called the DMZ, this demilitarized zone. It's this small section of land between North and South Korea that no one goes in. It's just dividing the country. Like, here's a spot where you see they kind of meet if they have to meet on emergency. Here is the South Koreans, and here are the North Koreans, and this little concrete line is what divides the country right there. And that's the way it's been. All right, 1953, the war is finally ends via stalemate. They agree to just kind of pause their differences. And as of late, you know, we've seen some pretty interesting things between North and South Korea. President Trump has visited, met right here, and Kim Jong-un has stepped across this border with the leader of South Korea. So maybe things are getting better, but you just never know. You never know what happens in Korea. All right, so let's take a look at what affects on the United States after this whole thing. You don't have to know, but about 54,000 Americans died in this sometimes forgotten war. Cost us a lot of money, $67 billion. Wars are expensive. And really, it's going to turn. It's going to doom Truman politically. It's a long-term loss for him. Democrats lose control of the White House when he's defeated by Eisenhower in the next election. So pretty crazy. And then what you start to see is the real rise, this fear of communism growing in the United States. It's growing everywhere. The Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, China, Korea. There's word that it's spreading in Vietnam. And people are now starting to worry that maybe it's alive and spreading in the United States. And this is the growth. This is the second Red Scare. Right? And people start to hunt Americans. Looking for scapegoats. How are the communists winning? And they look for someone to blame. They start looking at Americans maybe as part of the factor that did this. If you get a chance to go to Washington, D.C., there's a lot of monuments to this. Okay, I'll show you some pictures here. Chance to go to D.C., there's an amazing story of these American soldiers kind of walking. It looks a lot like the Vietnam War Memorial. There's all the names of the soldiers, the 58,000 that died there in Korea. And these American soldiers kind of aimlessly walking through. It's kind of a nod to the forgotten war, but it's also acknowledgement of the Americans who fought in the Korean War. And even to this day, it's just kind of on pause between North and South Korea. And you never know what could happen in Korea with Kim Jong-un. All right, that's your last one. That's your first session of notes. Review them. There will be an assessment on Friday. Best of luck. If you got questions, feel free to send me an email, or I can jump on a meet with you if you have any kind of questions. I'm there to help you out. All right, one done.